Hi viewers, this is a presentation on step-by-step analysis of Wagon parameters in a derailment case. The first parameter which we are going to discuss is the suspension system of CASNUB Bogie. In this sheet, we would be discussing the spring arrangements for different axle load and different type of CASNUB bogies. So this is the table showing arrangement of springs in various CASNUB trolleys according to axle load. So in this sheet, we have type of wagon in this column, type of trolley in this column, and the number of springs per nest for 20.32 axle load. We have modified spring nest arrangement for 22.9 ton axle load for different wagons and different trolleys, and the last column is for spring nest arrangement for 25 ton axle load for different type of wagons, different type of trolleys, and the spring arrangement. Here also we have two more type of wagons. One is 22HS and the other is LCCF. So this is basically for only 20.32 ton axle load. This arrangement is shown as outer spring, inner spring, and snubbers. This is the arrangement of nest springs as fitted in the bolster and the trolleys. Each bolster or each trolley has two nests on left and right side, and similarly the other trolley also has two nests of springs on left and right hand side with equal number of springs on each nest according to the type of wagon, the type of trolley, and the axle load. Now let's examine and see what is grouping of springs. Grouping of spring means when we have a number of springs with us, how do we identify them that they fall in the permissible range of 3 mm free height variation? There are two types of springs, one being the maintenance group of springs, which are normally turned during the service, and the other is when we get the new springs. So all these springs are grouped together according to the permissible variation in the height, and they are grouped accordingly. Say for outer springs, we have a range of 257 to 260. So the springs which fall in the free height range of 257 to 260 mm, they are given one band of green paint. Similarly, the springs which have a height variation ranging from 254 to 257 millimeter, they are given two band of yellow strip. And other springs which are having their height range within 251 to 254 mm, they are given a golden paint 3-strip marking like that way. It's for inner and it's for snubber also. So this table shows the range of springs and the marking of strip band all version of CASNUB. This is for HS and this is for HS modification number 1. So only the care is to be taken that while we assemble a nest, the springs should not have a free height difference of more than 3 mm. This is detailed in chapter 6 of revised Wagon maintenance manual. We have these spring tables for new springs, and the same principle is maintained here also, that springs falling within the range of 3 mm of height difference or height variation are marked according to their heights as per this table. So sometimes when a wagon comes out of a POH or ROH, we find that springs are given 1, 2, 3 bands of different type of paint color. So that mentions and that signifies the group of the springs. So in a particular trolley, all springs should have the same paint marking so as to ensure that the springs belong to the same group of free height variations. There is another table mentioning the free height of outer, inner and snubber springs for different type of trolleys. And in the last column we have the condemnation free height. Now let's take an example of joint measurements taken of a derailed wagon recently, and the readings have been tabulated. These are the readings of front and rear trolley of the derailed wagon, from where we see that on the first row the outer springs are having a height difference of 8 mm. So as we saw in previous sheet, that grouping is of utmost importance so that the springs are within the free height range of 3 mm only. But according to the free height, I have also put the band mark according to the previous sheet as stipulated in the manual. So we find that all the 3 colors are different because the springs do not fall in the same range. Inner springs, yes, they have the same color. When we go to second row, the outer springs are snubbers and we have one single outer spring. So this also fall out of the range, and here one snubber having a height of 303, this does not belong to this particular CASNUB trolley, which is 22 WM. 303 falls out of the range, perhaps this is for HS. So the spring has been mixed over here because no grouping has been done in this case. Again, this inner spring also has 244 which falls under rejection. In the third row, see again we have all different colors according to the difference in the free height, which is more than 3 mm. Or it is just 3 mm, 355, 258, yeah, 3 mm. And these are also falling in a different range. These also fall in different range. These also fall in different range. These also fall in different range. So in this entire front trolley, the out of range springs are marked red. and they amounts to around 14% of springs, and we can see that on both the trolleys no grouping has been ensured, because in this trolley also, here we have 255, here we have 261, so the difference is 6 millimeter. Likewise, these springs also fall under rejection, which are marked as red. So on the total wagon, we have 28% of springs which fall out of the range, which gives us an impression and a clear indication that while assembling of springs, no grouping had been done so as to ensure that the springs having a free height variation of more than 3 mm are not assembled together. This affects in the load sharing of the spring nest. In the previous two slides, we had seen the emphasis given on grouping of springs and to keep and group the springs within the permissible range of 3 mm height variation. And if we do not do it, what is the effect? Let us see in this video. This wagon was also in the same composition which derailed. And see how mismatching affects the system. Now this spring can be very easily be shaken by a finger, which indicates that this is almost dead, it's not taking any load. Just with one finger it's shaking or changing its position, means it's totally and absolutely loose. So this is the result of non-grouping of springs. Now we will see that how this mismatching or non-grouping of springs affect on loading condition. The deflected heights were jointly recorded, and the results are on the screen. The working height permissible is 217 mm, and what we are getting here is only at two coils, which is 217 and 224. All others are less than the required height. Further, if we go in for the bolster clearances, on the rear trolley we have 105, 102. On the front trolley we have 125, 122. Means 17 millimeter more on the front trolley. That means the springs on these nests are more compressed than the one on the rear, or we can say in other words, the springs on rear trolley are stiffer than the springs on the front trolley, and except 2, all the other readings are out of range, are less than the working height of 217 millimeter. Now, how does poor deflection characteristic affect the suspension system? poor deflecting characteristic of suspension system affect onloading and offloading of instantaneous load on the wheel. It's reflected by CBC height, deflected height of coil springs, what we have seen just in the previous slide, and bolster top to Bogie clearance. The following heights were revealed after joint measurements. Now see the buffer height minimum permissible as per IRCA part 3 is 1030 millimeters. Below 1030 no wagon should be allowed as per chapter 4, chapter 2 and 3 of IRCA. Very clearly it stipulates that nothing less than 1030 should be permitted to run. But however, when we measured it, it was 1011, 1013. Buffer height is an indication. Buffer height depends on three vital items. One is wheel diameter, second is the spring, and third is the loading. If loading is within the permissible range, wheel dia within the permissible range, then the ultimate doubt goes to springs being weak. And since the buffer height measured in loaded condition was less than 1030, so this falls under rejection limit. Rule S 4.16.1 and 4.16.2. This is of chapter 4 IRCA. No wagon should run with less than 1030 millimeter of buffer height of CBC height. What do rules say which have been not followed? Chapter 4 Rejection rules for broad gauge stock. From workshop, stock must not be allowed with any rejectable or other defects. The stock must be turned out after complete repairs in accordance with the rules laid down in chapter 2 and chapter 3. The permissible wear and clearances on different components shall conform to the limits and tolerances specified for workshops. 4.2 says, from sick lines, stock must not be allowed with rejectable defects. Rules laid down in chapter 2 and 3 shall be followed. 4.3 Notwithstanding any provision in the rules, rolling stock must not be allowed to run if, in the opinion of carriage and wagon supervisor, it is in such a condition as to cause an accident. So here these two rules have not been followed. One is 4.16.1 and 4.16.2, according to which the buffer falls under rejection category due to weak springs resulting out of non-grouping of springs. So what we have revealed from above discussion, during ROH and POH, springs were not properly grouped. Snubbers of HS Bogie were used with the weak springs to make up the buffer height. This led to buffer height go down lower than 1030 millimeter, which falls at rejection as per rules of chapter 2 and 4 of IRCA part 3. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe. We'll continue with other parameters. Namaskar.